Digimon World Digitize. It was released by Bandai in 2012 on the PSP. It only saw a Japanese release, but thanks to the fantastic work by the people running the Digimon World WordPress blog, we have a translation patch that brings it to English. To sum it up quickly, you're thrust into a computer world, given a monster friend, and asked to solve problems by fighting people. Seriously, your main task in this game is to literally knock sense back into people. The game harkens back to the mechanics of the first Digimon World game. It was always one of my favorites growing up, so being able to play this game again is awesome. Rather than gaining experience and leveling up, you raise your partner as if you're raising a virtual pet. You have to feed them, train them, take them to the washroom, praise, scold them, sleep, the works. Once your partner's stats are raised through training, they can evolve into bigger and better monsters. There's a large complicated evolution tree of different Digimon you can get to through different stats. On the flip side, if too much time passes or your Digimon fails at too many battles, they die, and you have to start the cycle all over again from just an egg. So a lot of the game then becomes resource and time management. This mechanic may seem boring and strange to you, but you gotta understand where Digimon comes from. From its very first incarnation, Digimon was kind of a Tamagotchi fusion with battling. These mechanics in the game provide a kind of video game evolution of those simple toys. It wouldn't appeal to everyone for sure, but personally, I can't get enough of it. The other half of the game is the combat. Rather than controlling your Digimon directly, when you encounter something, they go into a battle mode in a restricted space, and the Digimon duke it out on their own. You can provide direction like go on the offensive, get away from them, but otherwise you don't really decide what they do, they just kind of do. But it still manages to be fun and engaging, taking the original game's concepts and improving it. The music in this game is completely unremarkable. All the tracks in this game are kind of electronic, industrial, but nothing ever leaves an impact. The sound effects in the game are just serve as noise, and honestly, it's all very disappointing. The only thing I like is that the Digimon's roars and sounds sound like they did back in the very first game. It was a nice nostalgic touch, but otherwise, this game is pretty bland and boring. As far as how the game looks, it's a PSP game. It looks somewhere between a PS1 and PS2. Environments are bland and empty, lots of wasted space most of the time. Some areas are pretty interesting, like the water level with the submerged city underneath, but that doesn't excuse the rest of the looks, nor the character models. Ugh. But the Digimon look good, right? That's what counts. I want to love this game. It gets a lot of things right that I was hoping for from a spiritual successor to Digimon World 1, but it misses its marks in some areas. The biggest letdown for me is the town, File Island. In both games, the overall mechanic is to try to gently persuade people to come back into town. In the original game, when he did this, the villager would add something to the town to improve it. Maybe opening a new shop or improving an existing one, and it was a visual change too. You get to see your town go from essentially a ghost town with 4 people and 1 store to a bustling city with battle coliseums and shops and villagers. It was very rewarding. There's none of that in Digitize. Sometimes they improve something, maybe, but for the most part, they just kind of hang around. And there's no town growth. It always looks the same as it did in the very beginning. So I would say this game feels disjointed. The parts don't really work well together, the sound is unmemorable, the graphics are bland, the level design is empty and lifeless, but the reward and satisfaction of raising a Digimon and then fighting with them make for a pretty enjoyable experience. And that's enough to make me like this game despite its shortcomings. So if you played the first Digimon World game, or a fan of the show, or you kind of like the idea of raising a pet and then battling with them, you should check this out. This game's enjoyable, and that's what counts.